Hello everyone, my name is Danny McLaughlin. I'm the Associate Dean of Medicine at the University of Lincoln, and I help to lead Lincoln Medical School. I've been using team-based learning in medical education for about the last 5 years now from my time at Durham University. I would say it's nice to see you, but not able to see anybody just yet, but I hope I'm coming through loud and clear.
Hello to everyone, I'm Johnny Branney. I'm a registered nurse by background, now lecturer at Bournemouth Uni, where I use team-based learning when teaching particularly pathophysiology to nursing students, which I've been doing for a few years. I'm now a consultant trainer through the team-based learning collaborative. And hopefully as we go through this, you'll understand why me and Danny adopted TBL quite readily and why we believe it's so effective in health professions education, both nursing and medicine in our case, but beyond nursing and medicine. So we've got a little overview, so you know what Danny and I are going to cover. Just a brief overview of what is TBL. And then as just staying true to the ethos of the team-based learning collaborative, we think the best way often to learn something is to experience it. So we're going to have a go at a TBL session. We're a little bit stymied in doing that online, and particularly because we are not enabled to have breakout rooms when we would normally put you into breakout rooms, so we have a number of teams. So we've thought of a way of getting around that, and so what we'd invite you to think about just now over the next minute or so is we'd like 5 of you to volunteer to be part of a team. And if you'd like to volunteer, we'd ask you to share your hand, and then Matteo or David or one of the organisers can elevate your status to panelist member, which means that you can share your camera and your voice. And then the 5 volunteers would then serve as our team, so that and for the rest of us to then listen in on how that team is getting on. So I hope we can get 5 volunteers for that. So if you'd like to experience TBL for yourself, please raise your hand. We'll then have a brief overview of why we think TBL is particularly effective in health professions education, and we'll finish up with a brief overview of the European TBL community, which is the European focus of the team-based learning collaborative, which is international. So I'll start off by going over a quick overview of TBL before I hand over to Danny, who will start to take us through our experience in TBL, as it were. So there are 3 stages, if you like, or technically 2 stages. I've split them into 3 here. So we've got the pre-class preparation, and really that's part of that readiness assurance process. And really that readiness assurance process is all about getting people ready for application activities or application exercises. And this is where the team are working through a real world type of problem, a meaningful problem, and that's ultimately where the higher level learning or higher level learning outcomes can be achieved. And the readiness assurance process is just giving people the knowledge, some of the tools in order to manage those higher level outcomes. What we'll experience in a few moments' time then is the IRAT and the TRAT, which is the individual readiness assurance test. We can already see that TBL accounts for the importance of an individual learning, but as well as team learning, which is the TRAT, where the readiness assurance test, which takes the form of multiple choice questions, and it's the same questions that the team engages with that the individual engages with first, and you'll learn a bit more about that process in a few moments' time. And following that, to show how this is a very student-centred approach, that students are invited to actually challenge or appeal against either the way the questions are written and or against indeed the answer if they disagree. So giving some power back to the students, but of course they have to justify their challenge and must back that up with evidence. And then the final thing, or the final opportunity at the end of the readiness assurance process, is the lecturer can give a mini lecture to fill in knowledge gaps. So it means that the lecturer can make really efficient use of their time. They're only really having to prepare, if you like, and deliver content to students on those aspects that they find difficult. Hopefully then the readiness assurance process, which, or if I focus particularly on the IRAT, TRAT and the appeals and mini lecture, is an incentive to do the pre-class preparation, the pre-reading. That's often the challenge with any flipped classroom approach, is getting the students to engage with the work that they need to do before they come into the classroom. Now, obviously, all the delegates here are extremely dutiful learners, and you'll have all read your pre-class preparation. Hopefully, you will have received that a few days ago, which maybe didn't give you a huge amount of time to engage with it, but hopefully had time to read some of it, and we'll find out how well you did with that in a few moments' time as well. Is there anything you'd like to add about the TBL process here, Danny, before we move on?
No, Johnny, I think you've covered it fairly well. If participants have read the pre-class preparation, there's more detail in that if they wanted to go back to it again. Yeah, thank you.
Great, so let's do it. Do we have some volunteers? I'm just having a look in the chat to see.
Yeah, I think we've got 3 volunteers for Johnny, yeah.
Will we just to give it a last shout out to see if we can get 2 more? If we need to go with 3, I guess we'll do that, but it'll probably work best with 5 if we get just 2 more.
We could wait until the IRAT is over and just give people a further opportunity to volunteer for the team thing.
Good point. Let's do that. So let's, I'll hand over to you now, Danny.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm now going to put on my academic standing in a lecture space hat and do what I would normally do when we are starting the IRAT. I'd be asking students to come in and to sit down, to settle themselves. I'd ask them to put away any materials that they had. I'd ask them to put away their mobile phones, their iPads, their laptops, get them closed, because this individual readiness assurance test process needs to be done under sort of pseudo exam conditions, and certainly you don't want participants or students going back to look at the material. So as Johnny says, we trust everyone, and I suppose that's one of the challenges with online learning now, that there is a requirement for everybody to sign up to that understanding that everyone is being trusted to behave themselves and to do things in the right way. What I would also say to students is that if you are attempting to circumvent this process to gain a higher mark, the person you're cheating really is yourself, because you're not getting the opportunities to learn on an individual or on a team level. So I'm sure that everyone's taken the hint now and closed down the pre-reading that we'd sent you and are getting ready to go with the team with the individual readiness assurance test. So we've got 2 questions, and as Johnny said, they're multiple choice questions for the readiness assurance test. So I would normally aim to give students around a minute or 2 per question, but taking into account that there may be some students who require a little bit more in the way of reading and processing time. So the first question here, we would like each of the participants, just on a piece of paper that you have or in your heads or on your computers, to think about what you think the right answer is to this first IRAT question. And I'll give you a minute. I've started a counter.
We should add, if you keep the answer to yourself rather than sharing it in the chat, if you would.
So that's the equivalent of shh, no talking. I'm watching. I'm pacing around in my hush puppies very quietly, invigilating the room. There's a comment there in the chat, Johnny. I don't know whether you wanted to
Yes,
respond
sure,
to that?
I'll do that. I'll mute myself so my keyboard typing isn't disturbing.
So there's 5 seconds left now on this question. So sorry, Johnny, you're multitasking. If you could move on to the next question in the IRAT. Look at that. Who said men can't multitask? Scottish men at that. There's the second question for everybody. We'll just give you another minute or so to think about the answer to this one. And even though these are multiple choice questions, you can hopefully see that they don't have to be very clear 1 correct answer and 3 incorrect answers. Very often there's some subtlety in there, and it's really important for students to carefully read both the question and the potential answers to arrive at the best answer that the person running the TBL has decided is the correct answer. Okay, so I think we've had our sort of 2 minutes or so. There was also some time when the first question was up beforehand, so I'm going to suggest that we stop the IRAT now, and if everybody could just keep their answers to themselves, what we'd be doing in a TBL session would be collecting in. So either this can be done with smartphone technology or with responseware of some description, like clickers. It can also be done with paper, which is what I've had to do very many times in the past. So you'd be collecting in the students' IRAT questions, and then you'd be asking them to then go into their team activities. So what I was hoping we could do now is go straight into the TRAT. And so I don't know how many volunteers we have. I think at last count we had 3. Is there any update on that from Matteo or David?
Matteo, have you been able to change the status for the volunteers?
Yeah, certainly, yes. They are all here.
Okay, so I can see, yeah. I can see Sue. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just check that the TRAT now appears on the screen?
I can see it, yes.
Great, and if any delegates want to have a go at this themselves as well, I've put the link for this into the chat. Feel free to do that. But what we're going to do here is invite the team once they get going to decide the answer between them, and I'll input the answer as if I was a part of the team, so that everyone can share in what's going on.
So I can see that we've got Sue Campbell, Ebenezer Teti, Maria Kionis, who are 3 volunteers. I don't know if Sue, Ebenezer and Maria would want to put their cameras on and unmute their mics so we can hear your discussions, because it's really important in this part of the readiness assurance process that the team members are discussing the potential answers, often starting with, well, I thought it was this, what did you put? Why do we think that's a better answer, etc., and then arrive at a first attempt at getting the TRAT correct.
We should say as well, thank you very much for volunteering.
Yes.
May I begin?
Yes.
Oh, good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Chionis. I'm a medical educator from Athens, the University of Athens. Thank you. It's such I was reading about this whole process because I do a lot of teamwork. So that's why I volunteered. I want to get this firsthand experience. So for my first answer, my other team members, I don't know what you put, but from my reading yesterday, I have the feeling that it's D, that the group is permanent and it should be diverse. how do my other team members feel about this answer?
Can I say something just very quickly? I've realised that a weakness in my approach. By giving the link, I can now see somebody typing in on the very same one. So if I could ask people to refrain from typing in, please. I'll be the only person typing in. It was I didn't expect it to show up other contributors typing in. Somebody picked a nice team name of Sligo, which was nice. So sorry, I'll hand back to you, Maria.
Thanks, Maria. Glad to be part of the team. I'm Sue. So I agreed with you on one point. I went for diverse, but I put C, which was temporary. So because I was thinking different situations maybe required different people, and maybe perhaps if people are not signing up for something that's permanent, it might be more attractive.
Well, I agree with you, Sue. This is what I usually do in the classroom as well. However, this is a question that I have also to the organizers of this session. I was really impressed when I saw that the team has to be permanent. So, but again, I'm not sure. This is why I need everybody's help about
Ebenezer,
this.
what did you put?
Yeah. So this Ebenezer medical laboratory scientist in Ghana. I also work for team should be diverse and instances within could maybe going forward you may have some challenges. So once it's diverse and temporary, as and when there's any challenge, that's when you have people coming in, and then maybe considering the challenge, when people feel maybe they are not up to the task, they can opt out and all that. So I went for the team should be diverse and temporary.
Okay. Maria, it also sounds like you did a bit more of you did more of the pre-reading than I did. I have to say that I'm a bad student. I kind of forgot that point.
It happens to the best of us, Sue. Don't worry about it.
I thought I was just turning up, but yeah.
So what would you like to put down as your first attempt at the correct answer? The thing about the TRAT is it's done using, well, it used to be done very often using scratch cards and immediate feedback assessment technique, and people are using more online technologies now to do it. So you do get more than one opportunity to gain marks. And the idea behind the TRAT is that even if you don't arrive at the correct answer first time around, the team can re-debate and look back at their arguments and perhaps see what the weaknesses were before attempting another answer. So I think we should force you to choose something just right now.
I'm going to go with team should be diverse and permanent. I don't know about my other two team members.
So what was your rationale for permanent again, Maria?
Oh, it's from the reading I did last night, unless I misread. It was really late at night as well. Not that I totally agree. I do. I agree with you that it should be temporary. However, this is what I read, unless I misread. I'm not sure.
I just wondered whether permanent sounded sort of realistic, because you don't always have the same people in the room. But maybe with permanent, I can take that people then work together over a longer basis. So yeah, I'm happy to go for diverse and permanent. Ebenezer?
All right, so I'll go with
So is that a final answer from the team then?
I think so.
We'll go with D.
Okay. It's correct.
Well done, Maria.
No, well done to the team, actually.
We'll come back later to some of your comments about permanent versus temporary as definitions. We can come back to that, but we'll go back on to the next question.
Okay.
Okay. So I put B, the second one.
Okay, I'm not really sure about this one, Sue. I was in a dilemma between A and C. So I'm not really sure. I think I'm going to depend more on the other team members on this one.
Okay.
Why did you put B?
Why I put B was I was interested in like getting students to do things that were relevant, were practical, had implications for practice. You know, thinking perhaps about nursing students or something like that. But so it was like really tangible kind of scenario type stuff. Yeah, that was why I did. Ebenezer,
Okay.
with.
Yeah, I chose the E, which says that each team is attempting to identify one clear, unambiguous answer. So my point has to do about, you know, with the team members having to deliberate on perhaps one of the possible and or just putting it forth. So I think that's a decision.
Okay.
A.
Yeah, was that your thinking as well, Maria, for A? I mean, I was sort of I did think about that one as well, but then I thought, you know, not everything has one right answer.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about this one, really. I'm in a dilemma. Yeah.
We've got three, we've got A, B, and C, probably ends up being D or something.
Probably.
But I on a second thought, I think the B is also cool, where each team applies the analysis to significant problem. So whether based on perhaps one, they could look at a problem which they could feel could be a bit significant. Then we could say to deliberate and see maybe with this problem.
Okay, so
yeah, I think I'm going to go for B also.
And, you know,
yeah.
Which is different.
So we're going to encourage the team to make a choice now.
Okay, I think, well, two of us have said B.
So I'll go for B also.
Yeah, B.
I'm not sure that it's democratic is the best way, but let's see. Okay.
Consensus is always better than democracy.
Oh, there you go.
Also correct, and for some reason the Google form isn't behaving itself just now, but anyway, we know that's the right answer. So, Danny, do you want to say anything about the answers to the two questions?
Yeah, so the IRAT and TRAT questions should be based on the information that's been provided in the pre-reading or the pre-work, and that can be reading, it can be watching of videos, it could be, it could be a previous tutorial or referring back to work that had been done in a previous module or something like that. So it's very much dependent upon the participants being able to pick out the information, the facts, if you like, from the pre-reading, and then choose which of the answers is best aligned with that. And so it was interesting to see the team debating the various options, and that's a good thing. It just so happens that you, as a team, arrived at the correct answer first time in each case, and so you got 4 marks out of 4. If you'd selected an incorrect answer, you would have had another opportunity, and I'm pretty sure that you would have gotten 2 marks out of 4 by getting it right second time around. But the key thing about the TRAT is that it's the discussion between the team members that helps to allow people to see your point of view, perhaps the inconsistencies in your own reasoning behind that answer. So in terms of the answer to the first question, D, teams should be diverse and permanent. This is very much a feature of team-based learning as an approach. Diverse in that you want to have a good share of backgrounds of the individuals. It can be based on age, gender, prior experience. In universities where you've got students from all around the world, it's good to have a good mix of people from different cultural and ethnic backgrounds as well. You would want to keep that. And I think everybody agreed that diverse is the best way to go. Homogeneous teams tend not to do very well. And in terms of permanent means from the respect of being permanent for the purposes of that unit. So it could be a module that you're doing team-based learning in. But the other advantage in having a permanent team where there are multiple opportunities to do team-based learning is that the team members learn to work to each other's strengths. And they are also encouraged in most places where team-based learning is done, and I've always done it, they're encouraged to provide some peer evaluation of each other's contribution to the teamwork. So it's about forming the team. It's about working through some of the problems that might exist, the sort of storming phase through to sort of normal and performing behaviour of teamwork. That's the reason why team-based learning is designed to be done with permanent teams for the purposes of, say, a module or a unit of study with a few repeated sessions, just to make the students more, the participants more accountable to the other members of the team, as well as accountable to themselves for the grades that they may receive. There would be grades coming from IRAT and TRAT activities in team-based learning.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, and the second question, this is an example of a good IRAT/TRAT question. Not that the other's bad, but the key thing here is you've got the tendency, because the 4S approach of application activities or application exercises says specific choice, that doesn't necessarily mean that there needs to be an unambiguous correct answer. The team needs to make a specific choice from a set of options, and that's so that you can simultaneously report the answers that the teams have got. But it needs to be a significant problem. It needs to be something that has bearing and practical importance to what the students need to do in their program of study, or as we're saying here, mostly it's healthcare programs that Johnny and I have been involved with. So it would be some practical application of the knowledge that they've assured themselves and us that they have through the readiness assurance process. So it's tempting to think specific choice means one clear and unambiguous answer, but it doesn't really mean that. You want the application exercises to be subtle and nuanced so that you get lots of discussion and lots of debate. Each team needs to report their answers simultaneously. That's one of the other 4 S's, so that you don't have teams just copying other teams' answers, and you can then have inter-team debate if there's a difference of opinion. And then it needs to be the same problem being worked on by each of the teams. Each application activity needs to be the same for each team that's doing it, so that you can report answers and then have inter-team debate. So this is very much geared towards understanding of that 4S structure.
Good. And also introduces that real world sense of actually there isn't always a right answer or a clearly defined answer as well.
Yeah.
So any questions from our team before we move on to the next part? And we don't want you to go, by the way, there's one more team activity for you to do. But do you have any feedback or questions based on your experience so far?
I suppose I would just say, I mean, it must be pretty difficult to come up with the questions so that you have 4 reasonable options that then kind of leads to discussion.
Yeah, the questions are difficult to write, and of course that you never really know how it's going to go until you try them out. It's not the first time that, and it was really nice to hear the debate within the team about this word permanent and this word temporary. It comes up every time, and it wasn't a question I wrote, so it did get me questioning, is this a well-written question? But actually it serves a useful purpose when we then define actually what we mean by permanent within the context of a unit or module of study. And Sue, you're right that the challenges over having a permanent team, well, what if some students aren't in that particular day? Well, that's for the team to manage, that they're potentially being let down by that team member not being present. Or will they be prepared to sort of carry that team member in their absence? So there's those sort of learning outcomes and just from being part of a permanent inverted commas team.
So we're halfway through the workshop, so I'm thinking it might be a good idea to move on to leave some time for discussion. I noticed that there's some responses being posted to the questions in the chat, which is really good.
Yeah. So the application activity then, and it might be helpful if I read some of this out. Hopefully the text is a decent size all the same. But for this particular application, you're invited to consider that you are the unit leader for a leadership course that uses a TBL approach. And at the start of the unit, you allocate the students to teams by counting off groups of 7 students from the alphabetical class list. After the first week, when students have introduced themselves, you notice that one of the teams, Team 3, has 4 members who have or have had responsibilities similar to a chief executive officer of a small medium enterprise. One of the students on this team has posted on the open discussion board on how thrilled she is to be on a team with such experienced leaders. So in response to this scenario, what would be your first action? Would you reformulate all the teams? Would you give Team 3 more difficult assignments? Would you leave the group as it is, as the allocation process was fair? Or would you move the 4 members with leadership experience to other teams? So if you'd like to discuss that in your team just now, and not only we would like you to come up with an answer, obviously, but think about your rationale for how you would defend that decision as well. Okay, I'll hand over to you guys now.
Thank you. I think I would go for C, because the point of it was to do a random allocation, and there's a lot. I mean, everybody can learn something, so it doesn't matter that people have experience. They should still be open-minded to discuss. I mean, I get there might be a bit of a power issue. Ebenezer or Maria?
Well, Sue, I'm going to agree with you. I think it's very difficult to change a group once you have started. And then I think after another week, this is what would happen in my classroom. After another week, you'd have, again, someone coming up with a comment, well, we have such and such members and what have you, and they're going to request a change after that, and you'll never get your work done. I think that everybody has knowledge, and I think everybody can contribute on the team, and changes shouldn't be made after a week. I will agree with you, Sue.
Mm-hmm. Ebenezer? Ebenezer, are you there?
Hello.
Your internet isn't maybe as clear at the moment, Ebenezer, sorry.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's much better. Yeah, thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
We can hear you, Ebenezer.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Sorry. I mean, I don't know if you heard Maria and I, but Maria and I kind of came up with the idea for C. I don't know what you think.
Ebenezer, maybe you'd like to write your answer in the chat box?
Here's one of the challenges of online learning.
I know.
So what I'll do while Ebenezer's having a think and possibly putting something into the chat. So what is it about moving the other 4 members to other teams. Why are you not keen on that as an option?
Because,
Go on, Maria.
well, because I have tried to do
Yeah, I
this
also
once,
go-
and I think it was a big mistake, because then I had other other teams whining, and and they had like, well, you changed them, why don't you change us? So that's one problem. I think before even putting people into teams, I do a little bit of a background check. I know my students, so maybe I wouldn't use this to put them into teams alphabetically. I would avoid such a problem in the first place, I think.
So in your experience, Maria, when you were constructing teams, you did it from an alphabetical list and ended up with a similar problem to the
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And then I had people whining, okay, we have 3 weak members, and why did you put all the good people in that team? And yeah. I guess as Greeks, we're kind of whiners as well. So yeah.
So in your experience, Maria, then it sounded like there was one team that was identified as having a disproportionate knowledge base or experience, and other teams were noticing that. But in this particular case, we don't necessarily know that the other teams are weak in comparison to this particular one. Would that change how your approach, not knowing if the other teams are necessarily weak in comparison?
Well, I don't believe there's a weak team that exists. I think that they should be able to work together, and each person has their own abilities. And this is that's why teamwork is very important for me. Everybody can contribute on what they know. So what I do now, from my experience, is once I put them into teams, I tell them there will be no changes. You just you're out there, you either sink or swim. Figure out all your problems, discuss your problems. It's as if you're married. You have to figure this one out on your own. So, and that, I think that's also a skill that they have to learn, to work with others, whether they consider them weak or strong or what have you. I think everybody can contribute to the team. That's why I don't like making changes.
Sure. Okay, and Sue, would you have, why would you object to giving Team 3 more difficult assignments? Would that not deal with the problem?
And because I think part of it is the interaction among team members. I think that would be unfair to do that. And I think it would be a judgment. I mean, just because people maybe have the experience of being chief executive, then it doesn't mean they're good at it. You know, and I think, you know, like everybody can learn from each other.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sue. Very good point.
Thank you.
Yeah, are they good team players, given that they've all risen to the top? Are they going to work well with each other?
Yeah, I think they can everybody can learn something.
Or have they been promoted or elected beyond their competence?
True.
Yeah, welcome to my world.
Well, I've heard that people tend to get promoted to their level of incompetence. So, just a really good discussion. Thank you. I think in just being cognizant of time, we'll start to wrap this part up. Now, this is where there's still a bit of room for ambiguity and argument. But if I just take a couple of the more clearly less good answers, I think you're quite right not to give Team 3 more difficult assignments, because one of the principles within TBL is that the application activity will work best when all the teams have worked on the same assignment, because that then promotes inter-team discussion. And it's much more problematic to do that if all the teams have got, or if, you know, certainly one of the teams has got a different assignment to everybody else. That would be an odd thing to try and manage in the classroom or online. And certainly when every group or team has a different assignment, as I've used a number of times on other courses, that it just tends not to work so well. People switch off. They're more interested if they're talking about the assignment that they were working on. So B is fairly readily ruled out. And then with D, I think Maria described really well, and from her own experience, that could be quite disruptive. It also potentially devalues the contribution of everybody else in the room. If these four are singled out as being, you know, particularly knowledgeable and gifted, well, what does that say about the rest of the participants? There are probably stronger arguments, therefore, for either leaving the group as it is, because arguably the allocation process is fair. But of course, if we apply a bit of maths to this, it really the fairness of an alphabetically picking names out really depends on the size of the overall size of the student cohort. If you've got a cohort of 200 students, and you do it and randomize like this, there's a pretty decent chance you'll end up with diverse teams. But the problems can occur if you've got a lot of people with similar surnames, from particular cultural groups, or if you have a small cohort. So if there was only 30 students, or it'll have to be a multiple of 4, what would that be? 28 students. To then count them off alphabetically, it's less likely to produce a diverse team versus a larger cohort. So it kind of depends. And so you could argue also for reformulating all the teams. If it is that team 3 is the only one that has this particular attribute, that actually your randomization, the whole point of it, you're intending to spread this leadership ability through the teams. And for whatever unfortunate reason, that randomization failed to achieve that mixing of leadership ability. So it really depends. I think probably I would have initially leaned towards leaving the group, typically as the allocation process was fair. So I thought Maria and Sue, and I think Ebenezer was coming in to say something similar. That is a defendable position in my view, and some would argue about reformulating the teams might be, in some circumstances, might be a legitimate thing to do, but it depends on the argument they use to back that up as being the main take-home point. So, is any comments or feedback from our team, from Sue or Maria or Ebenezer if his internet's back up?
No, just to say thank you to my team.
Thank you as well. That was an interesting experience because it's been years since I was on a team doing this type of teamwork. So it's great to be in the shoes of my students and live that experience and see how important it is. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much for participating. It was wonderful. And so we'll just we'll move on now. Just a couple of more things to finish up, and I know we're tight on time now, so I'll go through this reasonably quickly. So there's just a reminder there of the order of events, and there's a number of things we've highlighted that we think that TBL particularly helps to reinforce. It's by no means the only teaching and learning approach to achieve what I'm about to describe. I think it's particularly well suited to it. So we all know that we want higher education to help develop critical thinking in any of our graduates, but particularly in the context of health professions education, we're thinking particularly clinical decision making. And many of us will already use various forms of case-based learning, but we think the formula, if you like, of the using cases in the context of an application exercise is particularly good at stimulating the discussion that might promote critical thinking. Well, contextualization, we all have had probably various levels of pushback from students if we're trying to teach them something and they don't see the clear relevance to the role they're about to do, so arguably helps with that. Hopefully it's fairly clear that there's a promotion of independent and autonomous learning, particularly because we've got the individual readiness assurance process. But of course, promoting also team learning, because we want health professions to work in teams in healthcare settings, and we want them to work in diverse teams, because we know that diverse teams will produce the best outcomes, usually for patients. There's maybe an element of fun here as well. I mean, learning, you know, at times can be a drag. It can be very unpleasant, even when we're going through a particular threshold in our learning. But hopefully, there's some elements of fun here and to promote student engagement. And for those of you who've used TBL before, you'll know there's a good element of competition that starts to form between teams keen to get the highest score. Hopefully as well, this approach will promote deep versus surface learning, particularly in terms of encouraging the application of knowledge and higher level learning, and particularly with the application exercises. And of course, just getting students to experience working in teams. And getting over the fact that they may not like some of their team members may not like them. There'll be some who are lazy, some who work hard, and you know what, that's what real life is like. Get over it. And so there's a lot of learning to be gained by work through teamwork. So I'll hand over to Danny for this last bit here.
Thanks, Johnny. And one of the things I was maybe just adding on to what Johnny said at the end there about, you know, not necessarily liking team members and having to learn how to work with people that you don't like, who are a bit lazy or whatever. Actually, you know, that element of peer evaluation, so long as it's done properly and students are trained or inculcated in ways to give constructive feedback or constructive evaluation to their peers, that can often help some of those individuals. So actually in TBL you get a little bit more say in trying to mould the behaviour of another team member than you would perhaps in a work environment as well. I think the peer evaluation stuff, if used properly, maybe formatively rather than summatively, is a really good element of TBL. So we just wanted to sort of finish off on the basis that Johnny and I are both members of the board of the European TBL community, to just sort of promote the ETBLC. So the ETBLC is a subgroup of the US-based team-based learning collaborative, and anybody from Europe, and that includes the United Kingdom, who joins the team-based learning collaborative will be assigned as a member to the European TBL community. And there are a group of us with a bit more experience and background in using TBL, who try to use funds which are given to us by the TBLC on the basis of the number of registrations from European members to try to meet the sort of vision of the European team-based learning community as it's presented here. If you wanted to find out a little bit more about the European TBL community, there's a web link right in the sort of banner headline there. And the email address for the ETBLC is just below that, etblc@teambasedlearning.org. And what Johnny and I are doing here today is kind of us helping to sort of promote team-based learning to educators across Europe, but you know, potentially across the rest of the world. And we've got various things that we do to try to achieve that vision. And so I would encourage anybody who wants to join to do so. You will be put in touch with the European team-based learning community, or you can email us directly. And I think, you know, Johnny and I were talking about this yesterday. It's a really good group of sort of community of practice, if you like, of colleagues, all of whom are very enthusiastic about team-based learning and who are very willing to help each other with resources. The TBLC in the US actually has a large resource bank as well, particularly for health professions education, but not exclusively, of IRATs and TRATs and application exercises, and runs lots of conferences and programs for people to become cognizant or understand what team-based learning is and how they can try to establish it in their institution. There's a couple of questions in the chat there. So there's one, do we take educators from the US? Well, US educators would, if you join the TBLC, then there's that's a much bigger community than the European one, but certainly we wouldn't be adverse to liaising and talking to educators from the US. That's right, Johnny, isn't it?
Yeah, well, really the membership side of things, and this picks up on Charlotte's question as well, that there is a membership fee for joining the TBLC, which is the umbrella organisation, if you like, and it's I think, Danny, it's about $90 US a year. It's cheaper if you pay for 2 or 3 years in advance, and people can join as individuals or as institutions.
Yeah, it's $90 for the year for an individual, or at least it was last year. And I think it's $300 for an institution. And as an institution, I believe that up to 5 individuals can become the sort of linked members for that institution and get access to the resources in the resource bank. Yeah.
So as Danny said, we in the European community, we will happily accept anybody from outside of Europe. We've already got some members from outside of Europe, but for US, for any educators, the idea would be that you would join the TBLC, and then if you want to join us in our work to try and spread and support educators with TBL throughout Europe, then we're very welcome to anybody from within Europe or outside Europe who supports those aims. And then there's a question a bit higher up from, is it Dr. Kovacs, which was, would you consider to use different standardization measurement instruments in advance to create the teams, such as the Belbin? Do you have any comments on that, Danny? About team construction?
So I don't think it really matters what mechanism you use to try to create diverse and equally resourced teams. If you felt that Belbin and sort of team roles was what you were looking for, then I think that would be fine. It's certainly a lot better than just randomly going down the list of alphabetical names. I guess, you know, if that would work for you, that would be great, because you're more interested in perhaps the team role element of team-based learning. But it doesn't really matter so long as you have a think about the way in which you want to create the teams and construct the teams, and also that you explain it to your students. You know, there's this principle of the team allocations being transparent. It's very difficult to do that with a large cohort. You can't exactly get people to put their hand up and you put all the folk who were born in August into different teams. But so long as you explain to them that the teams have been created on the basis of these criteria, the students, generally speaking, are actually happy with that. But I don't know much about, I haven't tried to use Belbin, but I'm aware of it being used in the past. Yeah,
it's an interesting one. I've heard from educators who have used Belbin or Myers-Briggs to create their teams, and from what I've heard, this is more anecdotal because I am not up to date on the literature on this side of things, but anecdotally, those people I've spoken to felt it really didn't make any difference. So in other words, they used the Belbin, Myers-Briggs, thinking they would create these really well-performing teams, and that didn't actually transpire in their experience, at least. So I'm with Danny. I think if you have just a decent rationale for your team formation process, and that's transparent and makes sense. So that, for example, when I was creating teams for an applied pathophysiology course, I based them on their year 1 anatomy and physiology scores. So there were a couple of people in the team who are A-level students, and then B, C, and D, and that was how that was distributed. And then if you've got a large enough cohort, just doing it randomly is probably defensible as well, because you're likely to have diverse teams.
Could I just perhaps respond to the comment that Valerie has made there in the chat? So Valerie says, I believe that a lot of TBL principles apply to high fidelity simulation as it uses a team-based approach. Yeah, I think you're right, Valerie. The difficulty is doing team-based learning in a high fidelity simulation setting, because often you don't have multiple repeats of the same high fidelity simulation suite that you would want to use with multiple teams. The way I did that at Durham actually, but not in a high fidelity simulation situation. We had, for example, SimMan sitting up at the front of the lecture theatre, and we ran through a scenario. So all of the teams were seeing the same thing, and you could theoretically do that if you had, for example, a camera system in your high fidelity suite, which you would have, and you could perhaps pipe that into your teaching space and get the teams as teams to think about what they would do next, what the most appropriate action would be. But it obviously also depends upon you having done the readiness assurance process. So you need to think about what they're going to be doing, how is that underpinned by knowledge and understanding, and writing good IRAT and TRAT questions, and then thinking about the pre-work that the students would do. It's about that sort of reverse engineering, if you like, of the team-based learning sessions themselves.
And then there was another comment from Valerie, which I'll just very quickly, because I appreciate we've only got a couple of minutes left. And Valerie mentioned a concern, if you like, about a diverse team being with each other so long that they started to become homogenous in some way. And I suppose that's the, I totally get what you're saying there, but isn't that partly the formation of professional identity? So the homogeneity in that context is people perhaps coming together to form their professional identity together. Equally, it depends on the nature of the team, because if you have an interprofessional team, so if you're creating teams across disciplines, then you're perhaps less like, you're still going to maintain, hopefully, that diversity there as well, but a shared understanding of how they ought to work with each other. So that would be my very quick response to that. Sorry, Danny.
That's fine. I was also going to say that, you know, I can see where Valerie's coming from, that would be an undesirable thing to happen, because you always want people to be able to look at something from a different perspective. I'm not saying you necessarily want mavericks or folk who are so far out of the box that they're dragging everybody in the wrong direction, but sometimes you do need people who in the real world look at things from a slightly different angle. And I guess what I would say is that you could have the team become a sort of normal and well-functioning team without the danger of everybody losing their individual perspectives by, as the team develops and as the module develops, for example, you could make the application exercises even more subtle and more challenging, just so that you're keeping everybody on their toes and they don't become very complacent and au fait with everything. So you do the application exercise on week 1 is just as difficult as the application exercise in week 5. I think you would need to have some sort of graduation or gradation, if you like, of difficulty and challenge within the application exercises, which would help with that.
And so thank you for those fantastic questions. And I think we're running out of time. So if you do have more questions, then our contact details are on the final slide that should still be displayed there. Please get in touch. Also go to the TBLC website, which has got a lot of resources available to non-members to whet your appetite and perhaps encourage you to be a member. So do check out the resources and support you may be able to access from the website.